So, this is your host of the Connected Collective, Nikaya. And I just have to say, there are times when I feel like I have to be super Cinderella to get all of the technology to work in the little window of time that it seems to want to work in. I don't know why sometimes I'll get on with this camera if I'm using a camera and something won't record, or the microphone that worked 2 sentences ago won't record. Like, that was the situation tonight. So, welcome. Tonight's episode is on loneliness. One is the loneliest number. I wrote all of these titles down. A favorite song growing up, Lonely Teardrops by Jackie Wilson, and I am going to be reading. So if you are watching this on camera, my eyes are going to drift away from the camera. Just accept it. Lonely People by America. The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, which I didn't realize is actually a novel by Carson McCullers. I thought that was a song. Scared to be Lonely. All is Loneliness. Scared to be Lonely by Dua Lipa. And All is Loneliness by Joni Mitchell. And then one of my favorite songs from my favorite album by Janet Jackson is I Get So Lonely. Just that whole album was magnificent. It was so good. And if you are into song titles on loneliness, there's actually a really great list on Zoosk called the Date Mix. I enjoyed going through that list. I could definitely go on with the titles, and I think it's really good to keep a sense of humor about, well, a sense of humor and lightness about loneliness when we can, because I know from experience when we can't, things feel impossible and overwhelming, and it doesn't feel like that loneliness is ever going to let go. So I wanted to have a little fun with it when I sat down to write. Actually, when I was out walking a little bit earlier today, just all of the songs came in, the songs in a novel. So somebody asked me today, it was such a beautiful question, and he asked, is your spirit well? And if you've never been asked that question, I'm just going to ask you, is your spirit well? Yeah. And just notice, notice where those words land in your body. So we were in this conversation about the impact of Corona, the global impact of Corona. And neither one of us felt like the question, how are you, was meaningful. So there was a pause in the conversation as we were both acknowledging that to ask how are you just seems ridiculous. That was pretty much the language that we used. And then he asked this question. And to ask someone if their spirit is well is a profound question to ask. And I encourage everyone listening to offer this question to someone that you care about, someone that you actually would like to hear the response to this question from, and give yourself and the person you are asking the time to actually answer this kind of question. We don't get asked, we are not asked questions of this kind of depth and care very often. Many of us are not. There are those of us who do live in communities and have communities which do have a way and have room in the community for going deeper in conversation and connection. But most of us out in the public are not asked deep questions like that. So when we are thinking about loneliness and our own loneliness, I just offer this question to you as you are listening. And then if you feel courageous enough to go out into the world and offer this question to someone in your life or someone that you meet out in the world, I do encourage you to do that. This quality of connection is what so many people are hungry for now. I definitely met people before 2020 who were hungry for quality connection. But certainly now the numbers of hungry people have increased. Which brings me back to loneliness. There are a variety of reasons for people's loneliness. I am going to focus on our sense of connection because this is the one that I have experience with as a former body worker and also as an educator of so many different kinds of people, age groups, financial backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. The desire for connection is not limited to an age range or ethnicity or gender. We are all incredibly thirsty, hungry, lonely for connection. With ourselves, we want to feel connected with ourselves and with the world around us. And it can be the immediate world around us, it can be the larger world around us, and all of the worlds in between. So I was in a meditation class this weekend, a really wonderful meditation class. And I will just tell you, the name of the meditation technique is Kindred. If you are looking for something to experiment with or experience, I do recommend this. And you can look it up online. It's Kindred, Kindred. It is a somatic experiential meditation. There is movement and expression with this meditation. So definitely, if it piques your interest, go spend some time with that. The facilitator shared the rates of depression and suicide in the class. It was a brief conversation, but it went deep. And I think that none of us would be surprised to hear that the rates of suicide and depression are on the rise. They're on the rise. I don't actually know if those numbers are on the rise globally. They're certainly on the rise in the United States. Yeah. I talk with people across the world on a weekly basis, and I can say, because I talk with people, that across the world people are feeling disconnected. I don't want to say that other countries' depression rates are rising, but I do know that I talk with people on a weekly basis who are feeling discouraged, disheartened, disconnected, lonely, like intensely, deeply lonely. A lot of people are pressing on, pushing through it, and that weight of loneliness is present all over the world. So there are the obvious corona-related reasons. People can't get out and connect, certainly not in the ways that we have been used to prior to 2020. I also believe, from my experience and the experience of people that I've spoken with and watched in action, that the coronavirus, this pandemic, this global experience that we are all in, has in many, many ways only revealed the sense of disconnection that was already present for many, many people across the world. And I'm sure that if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure that you've read or had conversations with people who are talking about how we are not able to hide under over socializing or going to movies or just the busyness of life, whether it was busyness of socializing, busyness of going out somewhere and shopping, the busy exteriority of life. You have probably come across an article or a conversation somewhere that has said, because we're not able to check out in those ways that we were able to check out, numb out, disappear from ourselves prior to 2020, because we're not able to do those things that allowed us not to feel what we're feeling, loneliness in this case, we are now in a position where we cannot escape ourselves. And so we are having to look at this part of our personal realities. You've probably heard these conversations happening. And I do also believe that the way that Corona has brought us back to ourselves, our attention is back on ourselves and whoever lives in our very small homes, our little bubbles and pods, we are much more aware of what's going on internally, and it's not all awesome. So this loneliness, what I'm really wanting to say and communicate with this is that loneliness has been present with us all along. Many more of us are aware that it's been present with us, or it is present with us because of the conditions of the past year and now going into this year. So I have a call to action. This news is not new to me. The numbers around depression, the numbers around suicide. I have had a number of people in my life commit suicide. And I know that this is one of those words that gets put under a trigger word. For me, I feel like this is important for us to talk about. There are too many people in the world feeling lost and lonely. And if we're not willing to be uncomfortable talking about these things, we are not going to be able to help one another. So if the word suicide triggers, I think that it should. And that may not be a popular thing to say, but as I've said, I have lost people to this choice. And when this teacher shared the numbers, there was a very particular piece of information that was incredibly striking to me. I have been familiar with these numbers for a number of years now, but because he shared that the rate of suicides is rising in girls under 12, that is the piece of information that was news to me. And I find that incredibly unacceptable. And so I am inspired to have this talk. That's why I'm inspired to have this talk. And I will probably repeat that statistic later on in this piece. I'm very proud of myself. I actually wrote this out so that I could, say some things that make sense and that are actually useful, because this is a very important topic to me. So my call to action, one of my calls to action in this conversation, is that we begin to take the time to ask one another, how is your spirit? And it's important to understand that I'm offering you the essence of that question. It's a signal that we are interested in genuinely connecting with one another. So if you have a different version of how is your spirit, then you ask your version. You do your version. It's a guide and a place to get you started. So some version of that in your own language that signals to the other person that we are deeply aware of their humanity and their relatability. We need to do this for one another. Okay. So some of the not obvious questions that we may be asking someone when we say to them, "How is your spirit?" is, "How can I be present with you today? What genuine self-expression can I witness for you today?" These are just some of the other invitations that we can be offering by asking someone, "How is your spirit?" This will most likely feel uncomfortable to people on both sides of receiving the question and giving the question. So just understand that. One of the reasons why we have not put much time and attention into connecting with one another is because it can feel uncomfortable and awkward. We are letting our shields down when we are asking someone for genuine connection. I know Brene Brown does not like the word vulnerability, and I am really working with her opinions about this word. I am not ready to give that word up. We make ourselves available to another person. And so just a little sidetrack. We got to take a sidetrack in the podcast because that's what I do really well. So the root of the word vulnerable is to wound. So I think that the word vulnerable is applicable because we can feel wounded in our interactions with one another without even meaning to be a person who takes things very personally or has a difficult time with criticism, or some constructive feedback, or someone, like the sensitivity to someone not responding to us the way that we feel they should respond if we take the time to make ourselves available for genuine conversation. For example, if we decide we're going to sit down and work through the discomfort of maybe asking someone some more sincere, genuine questions, deeper questions, and that person is not interested because maybe that person's super uncomfortable and doesn't know how to sit with the discomfort and work through that as we're learning how to allow ourselves to connect with one another. So, let's say I show up and I'm new at this, asking someone how they really are. How are you really? And I have actual time to sit and listen to you. I'm asking this question of someone who is like, whoa, that's like a whole lot of that's a little too personal, or nobody's ever asked me that and this freaks me out. Like we've all been in some position where we're either trying to offer something we've never offered before and it's awkward, or we're on the receiving end of being asked or invited to receive something we've never received before, and that's awkward. And depending upon how all the parties respond and engage with that, someone's feelings could be hurt because their efforts weren't received well. That's really what I'm trying to say. Someone else can feel offended because they are only used to people digging for information rather than people really wanting to open up and create a space for someone to express more of themselves and share more of themselves. Like hopefully you can understand what I'm really trying to do is give you some ideas about what else can come up when we start trying to engage with people and connect in genuine ways, so that when you become reactive, when I become reactive, when the other person becomes reactive or shuts down and doesn't respond, we don't take it personally. We're like, oh yeah, this is really weird and awkward. We're not used to connecting with one another. Like, we're not used to taking the time to actually listen to someone share what's going on in their inner world. This is going to feel really weird to everyone. So let me not take their reaction personally. Let me just say, you know what? I'll try again another time. No big deal. Okay. So again, to ask people these kinds of questions, and it doesn't even have to be the exact language that I said. It can just be showing up in a way that signals to another person we are not just flying by. We're not just saying, hi, how are you, bye. Like, we're actually engaging. We're making eye contact. We're slowing our breathing down. We're slowing our mind down long enough for this person to give us a response that's meaningful to them and meaningful to us. Like, there's an actual frequency, there is a vibration, there is a field of energy that gets created around that kind of interaction and connection. Okay, so I want you to keep in mind that when you decide to ask deeper questions, when you decide to make the effort to learn how to connect with the people around you, we want to allow ourselves and the other person the time that it requires to create genuine responses, to allow for genuine responses to make themselves known. So to allow our genuine response to the question, how are you doing? Or what are your dreams for your life? Like, to allow those kinds of genuine responses to come to the surface. Sometimes what we're experiencing, sometimes the response to those kinds of deeper connecting questions, it's right at the surface, like it's been waiting for someone to ask us about this. But I would say for a lot of us, we haven't been asked these questions. So we haven't given ourselves this kind of consideration. So it will take time sometimes to really know where to even begin responding from. And it's okay to say to someone, I've never been asked a question like that. I don't know what my answer is. And leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you for even thinking to ask. Like, that's actually, I offer that if you happen to be on the receiving end and your go-to response is to shut down or to become reactive, like, that could be a way to acknowledge that something deeper happened, something unusual happened, to acknowledge it, to recognize that we're not in a place to engage with that ourselves or to take it any deeper or further. And thank you for thinking to ask. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to even think about this kind of a question. Okay. So the invitation to give ourselves consideration, the invitation to connect with ourselves and another human being, this speaks deeply to our spirit. And you all know I talk about spirit. It's what I believe in. You don't have to believe in it. It speaks deeply to us. People, I don't know that we necessarily know what we mean when we say we want to feel connection. We want to connect with other people. And we know it when we experience it. Part of getting to the experiencing of it is being willing to risk ourselves in figuring out what connection means and what it looks like. But to be seen and to be welcomed into the life that we're living is a powerful invitation. And we do that when we make the effort, to connect. I'm trying to find another word that's different from connect. I feel like I've overused that, and it would be helpful to have another piece of language to work with in there. So I'll continue to think on that. So connecting by asking these kinds of questions, this is one approach, which will take practice. It will take practice and time, especially if it's something you're not used to doing. There are actually facilitation groups out there. There are a lot of practices out there that actually teach these kinds of skills, how to connect with another human being, how to connect with groups of human beings. If this concept is brand new to you, it's going to take time. You can do a search. You can look around for information on what this means and what this could look like and how you can start bringing it into your life. But just understand, it takes time. It will feel awkward and uncomfortable, and that is not the time to stop doing it. The awkwardness and the discomfort, maybe you're asking an inappropriate question, or maybe something inappropriate is happening, and you'll have to practice and develop your discernment to understand when it's inappropriate, when it truly is uncomfortable and something you do not want to continue to proceed with, and when it's just the discomfort of, I've never actually done this before. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I feel like an incredible goofball right now. That is part of the process of developing the skill of being able to meet somebody where they are, to have resonance with someone. These are all other words for making these connections. I wanted to also offer some practical steps, some practical, just practical human things that we can do to help address this question of loneliness. So another one of my calls to action is that we continue to be very discerning about where we agree to put our attention, particularly in the online world. And I know that these are conversations that are happening. I know people are talking about this. People have been talking about this since before 2020. It's just that a lot more people are having the conversation of, I removed my social media account from my phone. I stopped following this type of account, et cetera, et cetera. This is happening in the larger community of humans across the world. There are a lot of people taking social media content personally, and this is a huge part of our problem. Myself included, we are comparing ourselves, the way that we show up in the world, to people who have sponsorships, people who are incredibly photogenic or incredibly skilled at filters and editing. It's a very curated experience in the online world. There are marketers, there are all sorts of apps to help people create virtual environments around them. There is a huge push right now for people to be self-employed, and there's so much information. The volume of information has increased and probably consolidated its focus because so many of us have moved online. I think of a school of fish in the ocean. It's like 2020 has the school of humanity fish moving in a different direction, and the energy of the internet is just coming at people like triple time right now. we can still practice discernment, and we need to practice discernment for our own mental health as adults and for the demonstration of mental health to our children, our young ones. So I've already mentioned that the reason I was motivated, like, into action, the reason I was moved into action is because of that number. 12-year-old girls under, like, girls under 12. That is unacceptable to me. That is unacceptable. And I feel like when I hear information like that, that is a very clear indication that we are failing one another. When human beings at that age cannot see themselves in the world. So, I wanted to look up the numbers myself. I didn't want to just repeat what somebody said in class. So I did a little search online. And there are studies that you can go and read if you need the numbers. I read an article about a research article that was reported by, I think it was the National Children's Hospital in Columbus. I have the article here. So it was a report, it was research released by a nationwide children's hospital in Columbus, Ohio. This was released in 2019. So summer of 2019, this research was released. And the research said that suicide is still a leading cause of death among teenagers, but the researchers found a disproportionate increase in the number of suicides by younger girls from ages 10 to 14. Now, I understand that numbers can be made to look like a lot of things. I do understand this. However, going back to what I said early in the conversation, I talk with people every week. And there are a lot of people out there of all ages who are struggling. So let's pay attention. Please, let's pay attention to this kind of information. My question to myself when I heard that was, how can we help these young ones? And I don't have answers. I have ideas and suggestions, and I'm going to put what I can put out into the world. The rise in depression and suicide is in part attributed to our unconscious consumption of social media culture. This is another conversation that's happening in the collective. We are taking the visual and verbal stimuli of the virtual world too personally. These are my words, based on conversations and conversations I've had with myself and other people, and articles that I've read about this thing that's in our lives. Social media, technology, these things are not going away. Our ability to learn how to use them rather than being used by them, this is what we need to learn how to do. We need to learn how to be the boss rather than being controlled and manipulated endlessly by them, at least most of the time. So we need to put the virtual world in its proper place, and I am not actually sure where its proper place is, but its proper place is not in our hearts and minds. That I do understand. The virtual landscape should be a tool. It should be a tool in life. It should not be our life. So let's figure out how to return it to helpful tool status. One of the practices that we can all benefit from, that I know a lot of people have already been working on, and that is to develop discernment in who and what we give our attention to. So, what this looks like in action is unfollowing people and things, including information that does not feed you nourishment. Nourishment is not garbage food, and nourishment is not junk food. The definition, or one of the definitions of nourishment, is something that nourishes, something that does or provides what is needed for someone or something to be healthy and to grow and develop. If you don't know what nourishment feels like when it's offered to you, then that's the place for you to begin. So some of the questions you can ask, we would call these inquiries. Some of the self-inquiries that you can do is, how does your body feel after taking in information from your go-to sources? So your social media, your news outlets, your coworkers, your family, your friends. How does your body feel? And this again is something, if you're not used to doing it, it will take practice. It will take practice to even figure out what it's like to feel what your body feels. Just practice. Like, just get started practicing. And again, there are resources online, resources if you still go to the library. There are resources out there. I always go back to meditation practices because they've been very helpful to me. Body work practices, if you have a body worker that you go to, a massage therapist, a Reiki practitioner, an acupuncturist, a Thai yoga therapist, like there's so many different forms of body work. Those professionals can help you begin to understand what it is to feel in your body, to be in your body, and to experience life in your body. Meditation, I'm pausing because not everybody out there is like a great teacher at meditation. But even more importantly than that is, a lot of people have tried meditation. I'll hear this all the time. I tried meditation, but it didn't work for me. There's going to be some form of quieting the mind, of resting the mind, and becoming focused in your awareness on something. There's going to be some form of that does work for you. There are so many styles and approaches to a meditative practice. You can look for contemplative practices. So continue to look for something that helps you become focused. The mind is not necessarily going to go silent. I'm really working hard on staying focused. So I'm going to stop with that right there. But keep looking for your support and your resources on learning how to do some of these body-centered practices, because they help us when it comes to making better choices for ourselves in our daily life. We hear what we need to do. We get that information in our bodies, and then we're able to make some more fully informed decisions when we're out there in the world interacting with other people's ideas about what we should be doing and how we should be thinking and feeling about things. So bringing this all back to our relationship with technology and social media, and how our actions as adults can model healthy social media use and technology interaction for these young people who are looking for guides, looking for wise elders to help them step into their lives and make healthy choices for themselves. So, one of the ways to learn is to pay attention to how you feel when taking in information and stimulation. Do you feel energized? Do you feel depleted? If you're new at this, starting at that polarity is a perfect place to start. There's a lot of nuance to it. but just beginning to notice when you feel energized around something and when you feel depleted around something is going to give you a lot of good information to start relating with your world with. So if you're practiced at this, then trust your sense of direction and do what you know you need to do to keep yourself connected with what nourishes you, regardless of what other people are doing. So for those of us who are more skillful at this, it can be easy to fall off track when we doubt ourselves because other people are heading in other directions. Again, practicing discernment. We're gonna make poor choices. We're gonna make mistakes when we're out there in life, but we can learn to make better choices more often by becoming really familiar with what's going on within our own system of awareness. So I'd like to close with this idea, and there's different versions of this concept. And I'm just ready to challenge this concept. And the idea is that there are people who say that the majority of people in the world are not capable of making their own choices. This may be true, but I'm really interested in encouraging people to be in the group of people who understand how to choose to be someone who makes their own choices. And I know there's a whole lot of matrixy rabbit hole conversation that we can go into around, do we actually have choice and free will? Like, that's not the conversation I'm having here. There is a place in life where we can step out of the matrix, we can step out of the group mind think, and have a relationship of integrity with ourselves about what our values are. Basically, like what I'm saying is when we can get clear about what our values are, our personal values, not somebody else's values, not somebody else's ideas of what our values should be, but our actual values. We have a whole system of information and guidance within our body that can help us make clear and wise choices. And this is what I'm wanting to encourage people to learn how to do, is make your own choices from a place of personal integrity. And by demonstrating the way that you live your life and the way that you make your choices, it's the demonstration of it rather than the verbalization of do things this way. It's that living our life from this place that makes an impact on the people around us. I also really want to encourage people, this is off script, but I want to encourage you, if you have young people around you, please show an interest in them. Please ask them how they are. Please inspire their creativity. Oh my God, this world needs so much creativity right now. People are feeling so inspired because the things that we looked for inspiration were outside of ourselves, and we're not allowed to play with those things right now. Many of us are still in restricted environments. We have to go inward for our creativity. So support, adults need to be supported in exploring creativity. And please, 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 if you have little people around you, and by little people, I mean people under 20 at this point, like, encourage their creativity, please. Encourage their creativity. Ask them what they're thinking about, what they're interested in, what their hopes are, what their fears are. Like, ask them who they are as people, and be as supportive as you can without telling them what to think and what to do, because that's not what they need. But be as supportive as you can in helping this new human engage their own life. And I promise you, if you reach out to someone, helping someone else engage is going to help you engage in yours. It works that way. It's so beautiful. So just get out there and do that. Let's do that for one another. That's it. This went longer than my short podcast goal, but hopefully you've stuck with me. Thank you so much for listening, and I really appreciate your attention and your interest in showing up for these messages when I put them out there. I hope that you enjoy your day, your week, wherever you are in space and time, and I will see you for the next episode. Thank you.